Tonight on America's Hope, we focus on the founding of the United States of America. And did you know that most of the founding fathers could actually quote the Bible chapter and verse, and they used that as the way forward to write the U.S. Constitution and create this great nation? America's Hope starts now. And welcome to America's Hope. As we focus on the founding of America, let me first shout out to you. Happy birthday, America. You know, historians point out how it's important to acknowledge the faith that our founding fathers possess. Their knowledge of the Bible was often cited as the source of their wisdom in creating the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution. The Bible served as their guideposts. And tonight, we're going to talk to two historians who have studied the founding of America extensively. Let's get started. I'm going to introduce to you now Dr. Jerry Newcombe. He is the executive director of Providence Forum and the senior producer and an on-air contributor at Coral Ridge Ministries. He's also the creator, writer, director, and executive producer of the Foundation of American Liberty series, 7 historical documentaries on the faith and founding of the United States of America. Dr. Newcombe is the author and co-author of more than 30 books, including the book that made America, How the Bible Formed Our Nation, and the best-selling George Washington's Sacred Fire with Dr. Peter Lilback. He has been featured on so many different programs, including my former network, Fox News, Newsmax, the 700 Club, where I also worked for many years, CBN, Kirby Anderson's Point of View, David Barton's Wall Builders, and now, well, he's also been on the Eric Metaxas Show. Got to get all of that in, Doc. Washington Times and more, including now on America's Hope. Jerry, good to have you on. I'm honored to have you.
Thank you, Kelly. The honor's mine.
You know, you've been described as being one of America's leading voices on American history with a Christian perspective. And as we get to come up to July 4th, and the celebration of our Day of Independence, our Independence Day. Take me back, if you will, to that time before we were able to declare our independence from an enemy that wanted to be tyrannical and keep us from pursuing our faith and our expression of our faith and our liberty.
Well, that's very true. The founders did so much to try and work with England and to make sure that as British people that they were, still retaining their God-given rights. And as the 1760s and the 1770s, especially in the 1770s, things really heated up. And they got to a point where basically 1/3 felt it was time to declare independence. 1/3 said, oh, no, there's no way. And then 1/3 were more in the middle and they could go either way. And so anyway, Sam Adams, one of the great patriots, was a very strong Christian. He called himself the last of the Puritans and so forth. He was a man of strong will. And he said, is not America independent already? Then why not declare it? So they got to the point where they finally declared independence from England. But in that document, the Declaration of Independence, our national birth certificate, they declared dependence upon Almighty God. They said God is the source of our rights. And that's part of what has made the American experiment so special and so, freedom giving, because of that idea that our rights come from the Creator, not from the generous hand of the state, but from God.
And speaking in that vein, that it came from, not from the generous hand of the state, but from God, how did the Bible help form our nation? Talk to me about that perspective in a historical context, as well as its spirituality.
Sure. Well, first of all, the colonies as they began, so many of them started with a Christian type of covenant. They got the idea from the Bible. The first to start that process were the Pilgrims themselves in 1620 in the Mayflower Compact, where they said, we're doing this in the name of God this voyage is for the advancement of the Christian faith and for the glory of God. And then they became a group together, covenanting themselves into a civil body politic. God was the source of the rights, but this was an agreement for self-government. And then there were many other types of documents like that were in that same mode, the biblical idea of covenant. In fact, even the word federal is derived from the Latin foedus, meaning covenant. The idea is these separate different states made a covenant with each other to become the United States of America. So that's one key way in which the Bible played a key role. But a lot of the education, no, not a lot, all of the education virtually of the founding fathers. I mean, even the handful, let's say there's about 250 founding fathers, the vast majority of them would have been Christians in the Trinitarian tradition, as opposed to maybe Unitarians. Just a small percentage were more deistic thinking and so forth. But that was the minority, not the majority. The vast majority of them knew the Bible. As one scholar put it, they knew the Bible down to their fingertips. When they went to grade school, elementary school, they learned the truths of the Bible through the New England Primer and other sources. The Bible was the key textbook. That when they went to college, if they went to college, they went at Harvard and Yale and Dartmouth and Princeton. These were virtually seminaries. Of the 56 men, for example, that assembled in Philadelphia in the Second Continental Congress that gave us the Declaration of Independence, 56 men, 27 of them had the equivalency of seminary degrees. They not only knew the Bible, many of them knew the Bible, parts of it at least in Greek and in Hebrew, the original languages and so forth. So, the main thing is they created theological, statements along the lines of our rights come from the Creator, and we're appealing to the supreme judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions.
And yet, as you know, Jerry, with all of that being done, and it was not a perfect union, which is why it's so important to have written within those documents in order to become a more perfect union. Many people realized their flaws. They knew that they had an issue with slavery. They knew that moving forward, that would be a bone of contention that they would have to deal with. And much like Congress today, they kicked the big problems down the road and eventually have to deal with them, which ultimately happened. But before we get into that aspect, George Washington, Alexander Hamilton, and other people right here in New York City actually formed militias and actually started forming a government. Many people do not know the important element or contribution that New York City gave to America's founding. When you look back at 1789 and the inauguration taking place here at Federal Hall, and then right up the road, more than 2 city blocks in New York at St. Paul's Church, George Washington having his first inaugural prayer service there and thanking God for this nation being able to move forward. Can you tell me a little bit more about New York's involvement and being actually at that particular time, the capital?
Sure. April 30, 1789 was the first official day of the United States of America as under the U.S. Constitution. George Washington, of course, was the first president under the Constitution. There were actually presidents before him under the Articles of Confederation, which went into effect 1781, but it didn't work well. So the founders met in the summer of 1787 to revise the Articles. And real early on, they said, no, let's just start all over. And they ended up creating the U.S. Constitution. And one of the things that they said in that U.S. Constitution is, in order to, as you said earlier, to create a more perfect union, and you're absolutely right about kicking things down the road. And we could talk about slavery if you wish later. But let me just say this, since you asked about when they began on that auspicious day, April 30, 1789. Here's George Washington, first president under the Constitution, and he gets sworn in, and he uses the traditional process of the oath as found in the Anglican Church, which was his church. And so he says, "So help me God." And he said, "We've got to swear in on the Holy Bible." And they did, because of George Washington's example. And then that's the way all the presidents from that day to the present, all the presidents get sworn in on the Bible or have been sworn in on the Bible, and they raise their hand and they say, "So help me God." George Washington even added another addition from his Anglican tradition. He leaned over and he kissed the Bible. As Dr. James Kennedy, my longtime pastor and longtime mentor, and I had the privilege to write books with him and so forth. I worked for his ministry. It's called Coral Ridge Ministries.
Yeah.
Still exists to this day, even though he's no longer with us. But he said, George Washington kissed the Bible at the inauguration? Why, that's enough to give the ACLU apoplexy.